and guests. Today we are planning to continue the work of second day of the International Symposium on Interdisciplinary and Progressive Arts and Education. Our Congress is a global Congress that brings together scholars, educators, artists, researchers from around the world to explore the intersections of arts, education, and society. We warmly welcome all participants and wish you an inspiring, productive, and meaningful day of discussions and creative and exchange. Yesterday was a very difficult day for the whole world. And what does it teach us? That a human being must always remain humane, and the development of human values occurs most visibly in times of war and destruction. But the true power of humankind is measured not by its domination, but by its protection of most powerless creatures. If we cannot protect, for example, one-day life of butterfly, what is the purpose of developing science and technology? So I want to welcome participants and keynote speakers from around the world and wish you all fruitful and engaging collaborative discussions. Now I want to start our first session and present the first keynote speaker, Asmati Chibalashvili. She's a composer, candidate of art studies, and senior teacher. She serves as deputy director for scientific affairs at the Modern Art Research Institute of the National Academy of Arts and Arts of Ukraine, and she's got Bologna scholarship holder for 2026. Dear Asmati, microphone is yours. I just want to announce your title of your presentation, Posthumanism in Art and Art in Posthumanism. Art is a laboratory of posthumanist thinking. Thank you very much, and microphone is yours.
Thank you, dear Guanza, for introducing me, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. And I will try to share my screen and share sound. In my presentation, I will reflect on several tendencies in contemporary art that respond to broader philosophical transformations. These reflections arise from both theoretical research and compositional practice, and they gradually led me to the need for a new analytical perspective. So my title of presentation is Posthumanism in Art and Art in Posthumanism, Art as a Laboratory of Posthumanist Thinking. Over the decades, we have witnessed radical transformations, both in the philosophical understanding of the human being and in artistic practice shaping today's cultural landscape. These shifts are driven by a complex interplay of sociocultural, technological, and ecological changes, which challenge classical anthropocentric notions of subjectivity, creativity, and knowledge. In this context, posthumanism emerged not only as a philosophical paradigm, but also as a symptom and analytical response to a deep transformation of worldview, a shift that affects multiple spheres of culture, including art. Contemporary artistic practice increasingly transcend representation and aesthetic autonomy, incorporating technologies, biological materials, ecological processes, and networked communications. Art doesn't merely reflect this change, it becomes an active participant in shaping new cultural codes and identities, exploring alternative models of interaction between the human and the non-human, the living and the non-living, the natural and the technological. It's important to emphasize that in many cases, artistic practice not only responds to philosophical ideas, but also anticipates them, intuitively registering the shifts in perception, corporeality, and subjectivity that are later conceptualized in theoretical works. In this sense, artistic practice can be understood as a specific form of research, a field of experimentation in which new modes of thinking and being are tested. This view is supported by posthumanist theorists themselves. Francesca Ferrando, in her programmatic statement towards of posthumanist methodology, insists that posthumanism should not be reduced to an abstract theory, since, I quote, posthumanism is a praxis. It must be exhaustive both in its content and in the ways of investigating that content, end of quote. A similar position is articulated by Roberto Marchesini in Posthumanist Manifesto. He consistently deconstructs the idea of the human as an autonomous and self-sufficient entity. Instead, Marchesini frames the human as historically and ontologically hybrid, formed through relations with other life forms, technologies, and environments. Crucially, within this logic, art is not assigned a merely illustrative or decorative function. It becomes epistemologically significant. In Thesis 28, Marchesini states that posthumanism is influenced by new artistic performance and that it proposes new aesthetic canons. Seeing art as a form of experimentation with what is possible and as a form of knowledge, that probes the mesh of reality. In other words, art operates as a site where the possible is explored and where ideas are approached as experimental propositions rather than only represented. This establishes a feedback loop between posthumanism and art. On one hand, artistic practice register and model worldview shifts related to technological mediation of experience, the critique of anthropocentrism and ecological responsibility. In the other, posthumanist philosophy increasingly recognizes artistic practice as an epistemic resource, a way of thinking that proceeds through corporeality, affect, materiality, and relationality, often beyond the limits of linear discourse. In Marchesini's formulation, posthumanism itself emerged from these developing artistic sensitivities, born in the workshops of artists before taking shapes as a philosophical discourse. At the same time, a review of existing literature points to a remaining gap. Despite the growing body of research, there is still no sufficiently systematic description of how posthumanist concepts are implemented across different artistic formats, ranging from symbolic gestures to forms of structural participation by non-human agents. In contemporary humanities discourse, posthumanism does not constitute a single theory or a finalized system. Rather, it refers to a set of directions, approaches, and methodological strategies. A central theme across posthumanist theories is a critique of anthropocentrism and the dismantling of human exceptionalism. In What is Posthumanism, Kari Wolf clarifies that posthumanism is not post-human in a chronological sense. Rather, it is a shift of how we conceptualize the human and its place in the world. Wolf stressed that posthumanism forced us to rethink our taken for granted modes of human experience by recontextualizing them in relation to other forms of life and their ways of bringing forth a world. In artistic practice, this shift becomes tangible in works where the human is no longer of the sole source of meaning of control. Animals, algorithms, ecosystems, and technical environments enter as co-participants and co-agents within the artistic process. At the same time, Wolf's contribution remains primarily an ethical and philosophical framework. It does not provide a fine-grained analytic model for distinguishing how such posthumanist ideas are implemented in artistic forms. Another important direction is the rethinking of corporeality. In The Posthuman by Rosie Braidotti, frames a critical posthuman subject within an eco-philosophy of multiple belongings, emphasizing relationality, internal differentiation, and embodied accountability. She defines the posthuman subject as a relational subject constituted in and by multiplicity. For art, this invites a shift from representing the body to experimenting with its construction across performance, bioart, and media installations. While Braidotti's argument is primarily situated within philosophical anthropology and ethics, her reference to art functions more as a conceptual signpost than as a sustained analytic model for artistic practice. One of the systematic contribution to the theoretization of the posthumanist transformations in art is offered by Stefan Zorgners in his monograph Philosophy of Posthuman Art. Zorgner emphasizes that posthuman art should be distinguished into two directions: art that conceptually operates within posthumanist philosophy, and art that reflects ontological transformations of the human condition. He classifies 10 aesthetic concepts across three main philosophical directions. Critical posthumanism include aesthetics of ugliness, hybridity, and amorphness, aimed at deconstructing normative forms and anthropocentric paradigms. Metahumanism is associated with becoming, twisting, relationality, bodily plurality, prioritizing open-ended, dynamic, and relational process over fixed identities. Transhumanism includes superheroism, smoothness, kawaii, aestheticizing the enhancement, optimization, and emotional flexibility of the human through technological means. Each of these concepts is illustrated by specific contemporary artworks from Patricia Piccini's Graham and Eduardo Katz Edunia to works by Damien Hirst, Taylor, and others. Zorgner's typology serves as a valuable heuristic model for interpreting the aesthetic symptoms of posthumanism and situating them within broader philosophical trajectories. This overview of key approach shows that posthumanism is conceived as a praxis. The human is decentered in favor of networked and interspecies interactions. The body and subjectivity are understood as a relational and processual. Art registers these shifts on the aesthetic level. An analytical or philosophical and theoretical approach to posthumanism reveals a paradoxical situation. On the one hand, we observe a rich corpus of ideas describing the transformation of the human, the decentering of the subject, the hybridity of embodiment, and shifts in ethics, agency, and modes of interaction with both technological and natural environments. On the other hand, these ideas are only partially integrated into a systemic analysis of art as a specific cultural practice. Yet this logic fails to address a fundamental question: how exactly are posthumanist ideas implemented in an artwork, and at what level of depth do they operate? Is it merely a metaphorical representation, a cyborg image, hybrid body, or AI entity, or is it a transformation of the very structure of the artistic process, or even a reconfiguration of communication models, authorship, and role of the audience? This is where the key methodological gap becomes apparent. Existing approaches don't differentiate between levels of integration of posthumanist concepts in art, offer no tools for comparative analysis of different practice, and fail to trace the dynamic shift from representational to relational participation of non-human agents. In response, I propose an analytical model that is based on the logic of artistic realization. It combines two core principles: a set of conceptual nodes that describe distinct but interconnected aspects of the same transformative logic in posthumanist thinking. This is hybridity of the body, technological mediation of experience, relationality, expansion of subjectivity, and dehierarchization. Secondly, the model is grounded in three implementation dimensions that trace how these concepts enter the artistic domain. Aesthetic dimension, the level of imagery, motifs, and thematic representation, structural dimension, the level of form, material, technology, and compositional logic, communicative dimension, the level of interaction, authorship, participation, and networked communication. Crucially, these dimensions are not hierarchical, but rather form an analytical matrix. A single artwork may exhibit a high degree of posthumanist integration aesthetically while remaining conventional in its communicative mode or vice versa. Thus, the proposed model allows us to compare artistic practice across a shared framework, avoid reducing posthumanism to stylistic features, recognize art as a site of knowledge production, not merely philosophical illustration. This leads us directly to the structure and application of the analytical matrix. In practical terms, I approach each project by asking three guiding questions. First is, what is posthumanist at the level of imagery or narrative aesthetic dimension? Second, what constitutes the work as a system? Is it formed by material, algorithm, living agent, or environment, structural dimension? And how is authorship and communication reorganized? Who co-produce meaning and how? Communicative dimension. The five conceptual notes helps articulate what kind of transformation occurs within each of these dimensions. And this is what I will demonstrate through the following three case studies. Let me begin with a case where materiality and time function as active agents, shifting art from representation to embodied process in public space. Olafur Eliasson's Ice Watch, created with geologist Minnie Grosing, exemplifies posthumanist strategies in environmental art. For this edition, 12 blocks of glacier ice harvested from the free-floating icebergs near Nuuk, Greenland, were arranged in a clock formation at Place du Panthéon and left to melt in real time. The work invites direct multisensory engagement with climate change rather than depicting the issue symbolically. Ice Watch embodies it. The artwork lives and disappears with temperature, light, and human contact. It decouples artistic meaning from representation, emphasizing process, ephemerality, and material agency. This installation blurs boundaries between art, science, and activism, and aligns with key posthumanist themes: the decentering of the human, the agency of matter, and the transformation of perception through embodied experience. In the aesthetic dimension, the work rejects the representation of nature in favor of its material presence. The ice doesn't symbolize climate crisis, it is its embodied index. The viewer doesn't absorb an image, but interacts with a process, witnessing, hearing, and feeling the melting as an event. This aesthetic of immediacy constructs a post-anthropocentric vision of time where human temporality coexists with non-human duration. In the structural dimension, matter functions as an active agent. The form is not fixed or controlled by the artist. The ice transforms, disappears, reshapes the space and the installation itself. The work operates as a processual system where the non-human elements, the physical state of matter, defines the artistic outcome. This is where relationality and dehierarchization move from idea to material realization. In the communicative dimension, Ice Watch disrupts the classical model of artistic communication. The city becomes an exhibition space. Passersby become co-participants, and the installation is embedded in broader public debates about climate, politics, and responsibility. Communication is not transmitted but emerges from the co-presence of people, material, and environment. The next example shifts focus from ecological materiality to technologically mediated environmental subjectivity and distributed agency. Philip Beasley's Holozoic Ground, shown at the Canadian Pavilion on the 12th Venice Biennale, immerse viewers in an interactive environment made of thousands of digitally fabricated acrylic elements with embedded sensors and kinetic parts. This transparent forest-like structure resembles a living organism that reacts to touch, motion, and temperature. Rooted in this idea of Holozoism, the belief that all matter has life, the project reimagines architecture as an active metabolizing system. Chemical and mechanical components simulate biological process. Pores breathe, filters digest particles, and peristaltic waves animate the space. Rather than illustrating nature, Holozoic Ground proposed a posthuman ontology where architecture behaves as a sentient system. The human is no longer a separate observer, but becomes part of a relational, technologically entangled environment. In the aesthetic dimension, this work evokes a sense of a semi-organic environment. Space is perceived not as a container for the body, but as a creator of ecosystem capable of reacting. This aesthetic does not imitate life, but rather models an alternative form of coexistence with the non-human. In the structural dimension, technological mediation of experience becomes fundamental. Sensors, algorithms, and computational processes don't supplement the form, they constitute it. The behavior of the installation is not entirely predictable, which implies a delegation of authorial agency to the technical system. Here, the concept of subjectivity expansion is particularly evident. The subject of the artistic process becomes not only the human, but the environment as an autonomous system. In the communicative dimension, interactions is not programmed as a script, but emerges as a response. The viewer doesn't consume content, but enters into a system of mutual sensitivity. Communication transforms into a process of interaction where meaning doesn't precede the interaction, but is formed within it. And the final case shift our attention to musical practice and the integration of non-human agencies through data-driven process. The Uncertain Four Seasons is a global project launched in 2021. It reimagines Antonio Vivaldi's famous cycle by using real climate data to create a sonic forecast of the year 2015. The project brought together composer Hugh Costwaite, creative teams, and Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and researchers from Monash University working on climate communication. Using the climate scenario known as RCP8.5, developed in reports of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. The team created algorithmic tools that transform Vivaldi's original score according to projected climate conditions. As a result, each new version reflects the future environmental situation of a particular region, allowing orchestras in different parts of the world to perform their own climate-shaped Four Seasons.
Beneath the blazing sun's relentless heat,
In the aesthetic dimensions, the work engages with cultural memory. The listener recognizes the canonical form, but hears it as unstable, disrupted, no longer aligned with the expected cycle. The aesthetic effect arises not from sonic novelty, but from the experience of lost repetition. Music becomes a model of climatic uncertainty. In the structural dimension, the crucial point is that climate data serve as the formative principle. Algorithmic models and statistical indicators act as co-agents of composition, shaping rhythms, duration, and development. This marks a convergence of technological mediation and subjectivity expansion. The musical work is no longer solely the product of human intention. In the communicative dimension, the project functions as a networked instrument of knowledge communication. It operates in concert, educational, and media contexts, transforming abstract climate data into sensorial experience. Here, art functions as praxis, as a mode of participation in ecological responsibility. The three cases discussed demonstrate that the posthumanist nodes are not medium-specific. They are activated differently depending on where transformation takes place, in imagery, in structure, or in communication. This observation leads us to the question of the model's predictive potential, and here we approach its central issue. If this model helps to trace how posthumanist ideas are implemented in already existing artistic practice, can it also serve another purpose, not only descriptive, but also analytical and predictive? Can it help us distinguish between superficial thematic reference to posthumanism and deep structural transformations of artistic thinking? Can it serve as a tool not only for analyzing completed works, but also for understanding where art is headed in conditions of technological, ecological, and social uncertainty? The proposed model for implementing posthumanist ideas in art doesn't reduce itself to classifying existing practice. Its fundamental distinction lies in capturing the dynamics of transition from representation to structure, from structure to communication, from symbol to interactive process. Unlike most existing typologies, which operate retrospectively by describing already established artistic phenomena, this model enables the identification of a work's potential already at the stage of conceptualization. This is why it functions not as taxonomy, but as an analytical tool capable of detecting the degree of integration of posthumanist ideas into an artistic project. In this sense, the conceptual nodes, hybridity of the body, technological mediation or experience, relationality, expansion of subjectivity, and dehierarchization are not themes or motifs. They are operational points through which we can trace how art thinking. The predictive potential of this model lies in its ability to distinguish between artistic practice that merely declare posthumanist concerns and those that actually operate within a posthumanist paradigm. While on the aesthetic level, posthumanism may be reduced to a visual image or thematic gesture, on the structural and especially communicative level, it demands a configuration of the very logic of the artwork. The model enables us to forecast that the future development of art will proceed not so much along the line of new themes, but along the line of delegation of agency, decentralization of authorship, expansion of the circle of non-human participants in the artistic process. Thus, the proposed approach transcends disciplinary classification and may function as a universal tool for analyzing artistic practice. In conclusion, it becomes evident that in the posthumanist context, art emerges as an autonomous space for the production of experience and knowledge, As Francisca Ferrando aptly notes, posthumanism is not only a theory, but a praxis, a way of being and acting in the world. It's precisely art that offers a space where this praxis can be lived, not merely conceptualized. In this sense, artistic practice don't borrow posthumanist ideas from philosophy, rather they co-produce knowledge, at times even anticipating theoretical formulations. Art becomes a laboratory where new models of embodiment, subjectivity, interaction, and responsibility are tested. Thus, the proposed model doesn't claim to be complete or final. Its strength lies in its openness, processuality, and capacity of transform alongside the artistic practice it seeks to analyze. This is, in my view, constitutes a truly posthumanist gesture, not the establishment of a new hierarchy in place of the old, but the creation of thinking tools capable of functioning under conditions of uncertainty, multiplicity, and shared responsibility. Thank you for attention.
Dear Asmati, thank you for this amazing presentation. And I want to thank you because you're not only scholar, you're also composer. And what was very important, some ideas about music you see as a composer. It's very valuable, not only scholar, but insight from the processes because you're a composer. And it's very valuable for me. I want to ask audience if any questions from audience or comments. You can raise hands. If not, I've short 2 questions, maybe 3. Can your model be used not only for analysis of finished artworks, but also as a tool during the creative process itself? And one short question again, how does your analytical matrix differ from existing approaches, especially Sorgner's typology? And what exactly does it allow us to see that previous models do not?
Thank you so much. It's very interesting questions. Yes, about first question, absolutely. In fact, I see this as one of the strongest aspects of this model. Most analytical frameworks in art, history, or theory work retrospectively. They help us classify and interpret works that already exist. And my model can do that too, but I think its value is broader because it can also function as a reflective tool during the creative process itself. The reason is that it is built not around fixed categories, but around a set of analytical questions. For example, an artist, composer, or curator can ask, is the posthumanist element present only at the level of the theme or image, or does it actually transform the structure of the work or distribution of agency or communicative situation? This makes the model useful already at the conceptual stage. It can help reveal whether a project is only borrowing posthumanist vocabulary, for example, AI, ecology, hybridity, non-human agency, or whether these ideas are truly integrated into the logic of the works. So yes, I will say that model is not only descriptive, but also diagnostic and prospective, and that is why it can be useful both for scholars and for practitioners. And what about second questions? Sorgner's typology is extremely valuable because it maps major philosophical directions of posthumanism and connects them with specific aesthetic concepts. In that sense, it helps us understand what kind of posthumanist sensibility or worldview a work may express. And it's especially useful for identifying broader aesthetic tendencies. My matrix, however, is designated for a different purpose. It's not primarily a typology of concepts, but a tool for analyzing how posthumanist ideas are implemented in artwork and at what level they actually operate. Thank you so much for your questions. I don't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. So by the way, during Rast Music Congress, Stefan Sorgner was our first keynote speaker, and I want to invite him second time, and maybe we should have a discussion after his keynote speech next year, and I want to collect some scholars who are investigating transhumanist ideas in art. It doesn't matter it's music or not.
Mm-hmm.
So we should have a, I think, very interesting discussion next year. Thank you, Asmati. If there are any questions, I want to announce the next session. And our next session starts with the presentation titled